welcome everybody. Some of you I taught, some of you I know from Old Girls, some of you are colleagues or have been colleagues, but you're all very welcome. Thanks very much for coming. And I've called my talk An Unexpected Treasure because this archive really has been a treasure, not just to me, but to the school, not just to the school, and it has been used at A level, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 1, and continues to be used, but it's also been used in newsletters, in assemblies, and wider than the school community. I give many talks about the school, but it's not just me giving talks. Surrey Record Office have come to me about things. And the school is the oldest senior school in Sutton, so the local record office is very interested in it. And Non-Such Mansion have been very interested in it. Honeywood Museum. I mean, I would say it goes around the globe. It probably doesn't, but you never know, do you? You never know. Anyway, my first treasure that I want to show you is is the original logbook. Now, we've got many logbooks, but this is a treasure. It was put together in 1934, and they managed to paste on the pages everything that they had going back to 1884. So this is just amazing. I don't have it out today because I only have one of these, and it's just too precious, I'm afraid. There's something in this logbook which, again, is something I get often asked, family history questions, not just family history, but people who were here, say years ago, saying, where was I on such and such? And here's an example of one. So I don't know if any of you recognize this photograph from the Croydon newspaper. Any of you here in the 1950s? Don't worry, I won't ask you to put your hands up. But in 1953, there was the Queen's coronation. And all schools within a certain distance from Charing Cross Station, I think it was, were invited to send a deputation. And one of the first questions I was asked was, somebody contacted me and said, could you tell me where I stood during the Queen's coronation? I could. Of course I could, because there was this picture in the logbook. Not only, and actually, before I leave this picture, I must just say, the girl sitting with short sleeves on does deserve something like a CBE, I think, because it was a terrible day. It was 12 degrees, it was raining, it was very cold. Anyway, it's not just the photograph, but also, we have a booklet detailing what time the train they had to catch was 6:18. I knew exactly which position they were standing in. They had to be there before 8 o'clock, and it was on the Victoria Embankment. I even know where the loos they were assigned were. So this poor lady who contacted me got more than she was asking for. All she wanted to know really was, you were on the embankment, yes, and then I stopped really. But recently another acquisition, somebody gave it to us in the archive, was somebody who did, a few people who did a scrapbook of the coronation year. So that all adds to this feeling of history in the school. Something else in the archive is the oldest picture of the school, the oldest one I've got, and you can see on it that it must have been after 1885 because that's when that entrance was built. Do you remember the slogan on it? This door opens outwards? Yes, that's right. And recently I was asked, could you tell me what the gas lamp looked like above the door? And I said, of course I can, because I have this picture. And you can see there the old house. Some of you might remember the white building, which now has lost three of its stories, because in the 1960s they were judged unsafe. In fact, when the school bought Park House, they were considered to be unsafe then. So I think we're jolly lucky that there wasn't any health and safety probably at that time. Something else in the logbook? An invitation to the 1905 21st birthday party in perfect condition. And I've actually put some things out in the dining room from 1905 for you to look at. But also, rules of the tennis club in 1890. Don't you love this? I love this. 12 rules of the tennis club. That the girls in the 6th, upper 5th, lower 5th, and upper 4th forms be admitted to the club. Do we know that? We know that they could only take 4 balls out at a time. I mean, Sutton High probably in those days, maybe still, very perfectionist, only 4 balls. That if you lost a ball, 1 penny fine, and that you had to pay the fine on a Monday. So there's a whole load of things like that. I mean, I could even tell you, if I'd looked it up, what the weather was like 140 years ago. But anyway, I didn't look it up. But every time the school chronicle was compiled, somebody would say that they noted down the weather for the month. So it's quite interesting, I would have thought, for climate change, but there we go. Oh, here's another of my treasure. This is probably my treasure of treasures. I say it's mine. Of course, it belongs to the school, but yeah, I feel like it's a bit mine as well because I worked so long with it. And this is the earliest admissions registers, and we have them going back to 1884. And if you look very carefully at the slide on the right, you can see that somebody has written something about the girls who left. Now, I think it's Miss White. Miss White was the first head, and she was here till 1890. I don't know if it's her, but the writing changes after she left. I presume it is her. But as you can see, she did not mince her words. Girl on the roll, Christiana Macareth, an example of what an excellent education will do for a good, steady girl. And Christiana Macareth was actually just the type of girl that Sutton High was looking for, because one of the things that Sutton High did was to train teachers. So Christiana only left when she was 20. She trained as a teacher, and I know she went on to several schools, ending up at Bath High School as a teacher, her sister as well. And then we have a pair of sisters, don't we? Oh dear. Leading an apparently idle, aimless life, like the majority of grown-up Sutton girls. Not clever or industrious, making very little of her education. I bet those girls never saw what Miss White wrote, and I tried to track them down. I mean, obviously they're not alive, but tried to see how far I could get with their histories. And the one who was leading an idle, aimless life, she got married, so there must have been something probably to her, I don't know. Unfortunately, not clever or industrious, I couldn't find at all, bless her. But anyway, I don't think that's going to happen nowadays, is it, Beth? No. So, another of the treasures of the magazines, which were digitized in 2012. This is the first magazine. Now, as you can see, it says 1884 to 1895. So again, it's a compilation, really. And we have magazines going from 1895 all the way up to today. But there was a gap from about 1900 to 1905. They just didn't produce one. So even I can't produce things which don't exist, I'm afraid. Now, before I leave this slide, if you look at the slide on the right, you can see there's a list at the top. And that's a list of what the girls were doing who'd been there before 1895. But then there's something at the bottom, and it's about the girl who stayed at home. There is one instance, at least, of a girl who might now have seen laurels for herself and for us at college, but who, with that career assured to her, gave it up when she saw her duty lay at home. We all feel that it would have been an honour to have a Sutton girl holding a scholarship at college. It's a greater honour still to have her give up unhesitatingly the prize she'd striven for when a less brilliant and more sacred duty called her. Yes, we do know, of course, that many unmarried women stayed at home to look after the ageing parents. And I don't know who it is. I wish I did. But she does at least get a sort of mention. It was only about 10 years later that Dora Black managed to get a scholarship to Girton College, and the school was very pleased because the school, was providing an academic education for middle-class girls. And Dora got this scholarship, and the school was so pleased they gave everybody half a day off. I think that should continue, actually, don't you, as a tradition. Those of you who know the school has a house system, one of the house names is Dora Black, and there's plenty to know about our Dora. She was a character and a half. So here we have the birthday magazine, the 21st birthday magazine in 1905, and again I want to pick out something from this magazine. Reminiscences of the first day at school, 1905, Thursday, January the 15th, 11 a.m. And those of you very bright Sutton High girls will note that this lovely person has managed to get the date wrong. It is the 17th of January, and actually that's oral history, isn't it? People just get things wrong. Not very wrong. Anyway, this girl who called herself one of the originals says, the lunch bell had just sounded and the girls were trooping down the stairs, twos and threes and fours together, with arms intertwined and tongues busy. That would happen today, wouldn't it? And with an easy air about them of owning the whole school and of owning it for years, whereas it had been open just 2 hours. Some of the difficulties, she goes on to say, were no stationery, no books, no timetables, no clocks, no knowledge of the girls' names, nor of their attainments. Desks there were and blackouts, and happily chalk, no dusters. And it goes on to say how all these girls, 80 girls assembled, and there were about 7 teachers, and it was very like, okay, you look the same sort of size, you better go with her, and you better go with her, and we'll sort out the finer points later on. And then there's something about the support staff, the Neves, the first caretakers. It says, no record of the early days of the school be complete without reference to Mrs. Neve and Mr. Neve, characters worthy of a pen of a Dickens. Mrs. Neve, in sudden bursts of confidence, would tell how she had had 9 children, and when asked where they were, with inverted thumb, she silently and solemnly pointed downwards. Poor Mrs. Neve. Mr. Neve had a turn for science. He brought out a small glass bottle, and holding it up, he told how it contained a piece of the leg bone of an old lady. And there are many reminiscences about the Neves, actually, and Mr. Neve, who, according to the person who wrote this in 1905, had actually no position in the school at all. It was Mrs. Neve, but Mr. Neve just used to come and help out, and in the classrooms in those days, they all had fires, and it would be Mr. Neve stoking the fires. You might wonder where he got the small piece of the leg bone of an old lady, and that's because he also worked in a crematorium. When I first came to the school in 1979, so that's over 40 years ago, so I'm not quite as old as the school, but when I rang the doorbell to this door opens outwards, a lovely lady dressed in a black dress with a white pinny and a white cap opened the door. Her name was Nancy Scantlebury, some of you might remember. Nancy, she used to wait on us, and she was just wonderful. She'd been employed by Miss Lees, so in the 1930s. She retired in 1981, and if anybody has got a photograph of Nancy Scantlebury, I'd love a copy, because I don't have anything about Nancy apart from I do have some of her reminiscences. And she was, a big part of the school for a long, long time. Also, again, showing the social mores of the time, Nancy was the only adult in the school who was called by her first name. The staff were all called Mrs., Mr., Miss, whatever, but Nancy was always Nancy. Anyway, I hope she's no longer with us, but it's a shame. I'd love her to know that actually she was valued. She was really valued. 2 more treasures, Jubilee books, 1934, 1964. The one in 1934 I'll come back to. The one in 1964, this is how one thing leads to another, really. I was reading this, and somebody who was there at the time talked about Princess Louise, Queen Victoria's daughter, coming to open the new school hall, which was the study, and also where the front door was, all those new buildings, they were called new buildings. So she came in 1887 to open it. And this is what the person wrote. Princess Louise, beg your pardon, Queen Victoria's daughter, once came to give away the prizes in the new assembly hall. One of the pair of horses that was to draw the carriage from the station was found to be lame at the last moment, and the substitute animal was not happy with his companion, so the poor princess was rather upset by the time she arrived. I'm not surprised. So then I went over to the library and I said, do you have any newspaper articles about Princess Louise coming to Sutton High School? Because I never heard of it. Oh, yes, said a person over there who's retired now. And she produced this for me. And again, I've printed some of it out. I've called it a royal visit on the quiet. I mean, can you imagine today if one of the king's children came to the school? Do you think the locality would know about it? Well, they didn't in 1887. On Saturday last, the Princess Louise, Marquis, I think she was a Marchioness, but never mind, of Lorne, arrived about 1:30 at Sutton by rail. There were not so many to witness the arrival, owing to its not being generally known. The 3rd Surrey Rifle Volunteers would have formed a guard of honour had they had notice in time. And I think by the time she left, which was an hour and a half later, the word had got round. There was a princess in Sutton. So, as it says there, Her Royal Highness spent 1 hour and a half at Sutton, the departure being witnessed by a greater number than the arrival, and the cheering was loud and continuous. I have to say, she was an amazing person, Princess Louise. The only one of Victoria's daughter who actually was allowed to go to art school. One of the only ones who didn't marry a German prince. And she was a patron of the Girls' Day School Company. If you go to Kensington Palace, there's a sculpture of Queen Victoria on the outside, just outside of the palace, and she did that. So she was quite a go-getter in her time. But I have to say, she didn't come back. Can we blame her? But she does appear again in the archive. So there she is, not her herself, a programme from 1894. She's handing out the prizes to the Girls' Day School Company still, yep, Girls' Public Day School Company. And then here's an example of one of the prizes I have in the archive, which is Dora Black's prize, again presented by Her Royal Highness the Princess Louise. Going on. This, I don't have the original of this, but this is the oldest photo, I believe, that we have, or copy of a photo we have in the archive. The person sitting in the middle is Miss White, the first head teacher. We know that she left in 1890. We know the front door hadn't been built till 1885, so we know sometime during that 5-year period, she was sitting with these people. Who were they? It's difficult to know. They weren't teenagers then, were there? You were either a child or you were suddenly a grown-up looking like your mum. And were some of these teachers, were they all students? I don't know. And if you don't get anything else from this talk other than, if you have photographs, I mean, perhaps it doesn't work nowadays because of digitization and things, but putting who people are is a really good idea, because I'd love to know who these people were, and I'm just never going to know, am I? We've also got 3 photograph albums from 1899 and 1900. So here we have some girls at the back of the school playing hockey. Looks like they're playing in a load of puddles, but I think it's the quality of the photograph. Much better quality is the art department, where they used to do classical drawings. I think a lot has changed in the art department since then. And then, science lesson. So again, about the year 1900, and the lady on the right is a lady called Annette Hunt. I didn't know very much about her, but here she is again in a photograph of the staff in 1924. She is in the middle row. She's second from left. She looks very scary, but I think she was very well loved. And here we have her staff record. So I know when she was employed, I know that she taught science, and I know about her salary. As you can see, by the time she left, it was about £440 a year, 22,000 today, even though she had done wonderful things for the school. And Annette Hunt, many years ago, somebody came to the school, well actually a professor of chemistry from Newfoundland, and his wife came to the school and said they were researching Annette Hunt. And I thought, who's Annette Hunt? So anyway, I opened the archive for them to use. They stayed quite a long time. And then they produced a book which they had used a lot of the chemistry departments from the Girls' Public Day School Trust. And Annette Hunt was one person they were very interested in because she designed the new laboratories in Sutton High School, which are now mostly where the dining room is, that you're going into shortly, and were considered to be some of the best in England. So the science teaching, I think, probably was first rate. Unfortunately, the government decided in 1932 that girls really, their brains didn't really work very well with physics and chemistry. So they were encouraged to study biology. And I'm very pleased to say that Sutton High did not really adhere to that, carried on with the teaching of chemistry and physics. Dora Black, in her autobiography, wrote this about science teaching: "I was told nothing whatever about sex, not even where babies came from. The books on anatomy and physiology, which did exist in the school library, had certain dangerous pages stuck together." And I want to know whether that's still the case. But probably not. For those of you who know anything about Dora Black's history, she was a great friend of Marie Stopes, the birth control pioneer. So you can see why that's one of the things she wrote in her memoir. But she also talked about Miss Hunt and how Miss Hunt would play tricks on them and would say, "Oh, look at that pink gas which comes out of something or other." And they would all go, "Yes, Miss Hunt." And she would go, "Oh, you know nothing. There is no pink smoke." So she was a character, but so was Dora. So I have school inspections dating from 1907 and, oh, hang on, sorry, out of kilter, from 1907. And what I find interesting about this one in 1907 is its final conclusion, because it's about Sutton, really. And apart from the history department, who got slated, unfortunately, in 1907, it says, I know, the organisation, discipline and tone of the school are highly satisfactory, and within its specified scope, it's quite efficient. I think that's praise. But then it says, in estimating the increasing number of delicate children brought to Sutton as a health resort, must not be lost sight of. The strenuous lie that is possible in other localities cannot, in many cases, be exacted. So there we go, Health Resort Sutton, another reason to live here. One of the 1900 photos got Miss Dewars in the centre, and you can see that in front of her there were two little boys. And many of you will know that Sutton High School had boys in the kindergarten from about 1890 until the 1950s. And that was wonderful for the history department, really, because it meant that whenever we went to the battlefields, we could track down the 4 members who'd been in the kindergarten who died in the Great War. And that used to mean a lot to the girls. Here's one of them, Sidney Price, killed at the Somme in 1916, and this was a write-up in the school magazine about him. Handsome lad, isn't he? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing it out to me. There he is. He's a handsome lad, isn't he? Anyway, I got that from Bishop Stortford College, which is where he went to. He didn't look like that in the kindergarten. But he was obviously well liked in Sutton High because 3 out of the 4 get a bit of a mention, but he gets a couple of paragraphs, including one written by his commanding officer, who said, "Your son was one of my subalterns and a more popular fellow, never joined the regiment. Sidney was down at the base before we went over the top, but he got special leave to join us that night. I just mention this to emphasize his courage and enthusiasm." Now, I know that they probably said this about lots of different soldiers to try and make parents feel better about the fact their son was not coming home. But poor old Sidney, he did seem to, as I said, have been well liked. He was at school just for a couple of years. He would have been in that, probably been in that photograph with Miss Dewars, but again, no names. He had a twin, Vincent, and Vincent lived till 1973. Anyway, if you ever go to the Tietville Memorial at the Somme, you can see Sydney's name there. And we did. Every year we go and pay tribute to Sydney. The school archive has been absolutely brilliant about discovering things about women and girls during the war. Yep, it's the right slide. The slide on the left, Surrey and the Great War. I gave quite a lot of talks about what happened at Sutton High School during the Great War, because it seemed to me that men were getting a lot of publicity for what had happened, and rightly so, but who was speaking up for the women? So I made sure that whenever I took the girls to the battlefields, I'd always end with, and this is what life was like for a woman or a girl at the time. And they weren't in the trenches, and they weren't in fear of their lives, but many of them, of course, had their lives totally disrupted by the war and lost fathers, brothers, and sons of the old girls. And from the Jubilee book, which was in 1934, which you can see on the right-hand side, one of the great heroines of the archive is a Miss Tayton. And Miss Tayton tried to track down every single girl who had been at Sutton High from 1884 to 1934. And although this was an impossible task, and she didn't manage it, she tracked down a lot, and she asked them to say what education they'd gone on to, and what jobs they were doing, if any, their marital status, and also she asked them to write down what they'd done during the Great War. And they did. So, we were able to find out that there were at least 80 of the old girls who were volunteering, mainly as VADs, but not just as VADs during the Great War. Here's an example of a girl who was here during the war. Now, this photograph does not come from my archive. It comes from something called the Knights Whittome Edwardian Photograph Collection. Even though the Knights Whittome boys came to this school, there is a connection. And here we have 3 Gashian children. There is Stanley Gashian at the back, there's Anthony the baby, who did come to the kindergarten, and there's Margaret, who was here until 1919. Stanley, as I said, didn't come here. He went to Epsom College, but he disappeared during the war. He was obviously killed, but he was missing, presumed dead, and his father looked for him for at least a year. Can you imagine the impact that had on Margaret, knowing that her brother was lost, but not knowing whether he was dead or alive, and they were getting some correspondence that he'd been seen here or seen there. The archive doesn't tell me how Margaret felt. I just know that she became, with another lady called Mona Price, she became our first doctor. And also, a person who used the archive to look into women's education said about her, she got to be one of the busiest ladies who'd ever come out of Sutton High School. For not only, as you can see, was she married, she had 2 sets of twins, she was a vicar's wife, which probably was a job in itself, and she was a medical officer in charge of Infant Welfare Centre at Dagenham, and she did other things other than that. There's a great long list. I wish I'd met her, but she died in 1979. So sometimes you can only imagine things from the archive. The only person who gets recorded as crying their eyes out during the Great War was actually the French teacher who was French. I think they probably thought it was okay if you were Mediterranean to shed a tear. And poor old Mademoiselle Bush, she did lose 3 brothers and a father during the Great War. So, but nobody else is recorded as crying, stiff upper lip. So that's a talk in itself. So moving swiftly on to the Second World War, many of you will remember the cheeses. Again, this is a talk in itself, so I'm not stopping here really. But the cheeses were the air raid shelters, and many of you would have climbed up them, even though you were not supposed to have climbed up them. And they're rather wonderful. And obviously, they're no longer here because they've been built on for various reasons. But I'm sure many of you remember them with fondness. But also something else from the Second World War. I just happened to be reading the Jubilee book of 1934, and saw, oh, Margaret Mackenzie Anderson, daughter of the governor of Bengal. I thought, ooh, daughter of the governor of Bengal. Who was that? What does that mean? So I tracked her down, and actually, this governor of Bengal turned out to be the Home Secretary during the war. So does the name ring any bells with you? The surname? Second World War? Anderson Shelters. That's right, Anderson Shelters. So her father was responsible for the Anderson Shelters. So when I go to year 6 and talk to them about the Second World War, I say, tell me something about the shelters. I can tell you that the daughter of the man whose name is applied to the Anderson Shelters was here in the 1930s. I mean, unfortunately, there is no picture of her. The National Portrait Gallery has got one, it's not on display. She became a dame. She was an army officer in her own right. She led the Women's Army from 1967. But again, who would have known about Mary Mackenzie Anderson? And here we have a picture of the old school hall. This again is from the 1900 photograph album. Look carefully. Can you see the panel in the middle, which records what happened to, prizes really, in exhibitions that were achieved by some of the girls at Sutton High. And here's part of that. And if you look at 1900, Alice Laura Embleton. Now, I was sitting looking at this one day, thinking, oh, Alice Laura Embleton. She won an 1851 exhibition, a science research scholarship. Oh, I thought, this could be a way of telling the girls something about a scientist in the school. So I found her in the admissions register. She was the daughter of an engraver. She didn't stay very long because her father ran out of money and withdrew her, but she still kept in touch with Sutton High. And I found out that she was also on that list from the first magazine of what happened to the girls. It was said that she was a student at Aberystwyth College. I contacted them and they said, oh no, she wasn't here. I found she was actually at Cardiff University. She was part of their first cohort of scientists. She was the first woman to be at the Sorbonne, training under somebody called Professor Marichal. I mean, it means nothing to me, but perhaps you're a chemist, a biologist, rather it does. She was the first woman to speak at the Linnaean Society at Burlington House. And then I found something else about old Alice Laura Embleton. Ooh. Whoa. Yes, I mean, Croydon High School actually have got a bona fide suffragette who was the headmistress, but it's difficult to find the suffragettes at Sutton High. Occasionally, when 1913, when Emily Davison threw herself under the King's horse, the speaker at the prize giving, who was a man, did say, stay shy of any unwomanly behaviour, girls. So I think he was referring, don't throw yourself under horses at Derby. It's not good. But Alice Embleton, she became very much involved with the suffragettes. She was a great friend of Emmeline Pankhurst's chauffeur, Vera Home. And so not only could I tell the girls, we have somebody who was a scientist who did lots of firsts in her lifetime, that she also was a suffragette. I mean, if only she got on hunger strike, but she didn't. I mean, I couldn't wish that on anybody really, but it would have been great for the archive to have had a hunger strike, wouldn't it? When we had I think it was the 1971 cohort back, they told me about how they tied themselves to various railings and trees around the school because they weren't allowed to join in a mock election in the 1960s. So there were sort of mock suffragettes, shall we say. Sometimes we have strange additions to the archive. On the left is a postcard. Now, Miss Charlesworth, many of you will remember Miss Charlesworth, the headmistress at the time. Don't worry if you can't read it, it doesn't matter. But I had probably an email, I think, from somebody saying that they found Miss Charlesworth's photograph album, was Kate there, thank you, in a skip in Southampton. I think it was Southampton, wasn't it? And would I like it? I said, oh, yes, please. So it came to me. Some of the postcards are to Miss Charlesworth, some are from her. I picked this one out because it's Naples in the late 1940s, and because it says this boat that they were travelling on reminded this person of what it was like at break time at Sutton High, which is rather lovely. The one on the right is about a lady called Violet Henry, she was head of the junior department for many, many years. This is a reference. It still was in its original envelope. It turned up on eBay, and somebody in Suffolk bought it, and then contacted me and said, would you like it? So I said, oh, yes, please. So he didn't require any payment for it, and he sent me this letter about this Violet Henry, and the reference that she was given. I'm sure most of the things that were said about her would be said about many, many teachers. She was used to train teachers as well. Here we have the photograph again on the left of the teachers in 1924, and Violet Henry is just behind the head teacher at the time, who was Miss Lees, and she was also a pupil here. So she on and off, she was here at the school from about 1903 till about 1936. So I think I beat her, but not by much. And as you can see on the right, I've even got her staff record. So she is an interesting character. Something that is perennial, starts right from the start of Sutton High, is uniform. Uniform. So I did an assembly a few years back, and I got some girls to dress up in the uniform covering various years. But even in the first magazine, they talked about the uniform, which was just a hat band, a violet hat band. And the girls said it was fashionable to wear a white blouse with sort of like an elasticated waist to it. And one said that she took a kitten into school for a week with the kitten inside her blouse. Do I believe this? I think somebody might have heard it mewing, don't you, unless she sellotaped its mouth. Was there sellotape? I don't know. There was no uniform as we would know it until Miss Lees, the 1920s. It was violet, it was purple, but unfortunately purple used to fade really quickly then to a sort of shade of muddy green. So Miss Lees said to the girls, why don't we change the colour to green? Oh, pupil power came in. And actually, on the whole, girls can be quite conservative about their traditions. And overwhelmingly, no, they decided they were going to stay with the purple. So Miss Lees had to find a purple that didn't fade, which I think was probably quite expensive. I love the way in the archive you read sometime people saying they don't want to wear black tights, they want to wear white ankle socks, or black stockings rather, and then later on they want to wear black tights, they want their skirts up, they want their skirts down, they want to wear earrings, they want to do this, they want to do that. Here's an example of a poem written in 1947, The Lament of a School Hat. Some of you will have had school hats. I remember in the archive once somebody saying her school hat got her into trouble because she was discovered by a member of the public smoking. She was only 11. And she had a school hat on, and she knew that the head teacher at the time, I think that was Miss Charlesworth, would know, and that she would probably be expelled for doing that. So she said she was terrified, and she went in the morning expecting Miss Charlesworth to be there. Miss Charlesworth had gone off on one of her travels, so she never did get expelled, this girl. But here we have The Lament of a School Hat. I love this one. I once was a shapely stiff velour with a hat band, mauve and bright. Little I knew what lay in store, how sad would be my plight. At first I had such loving care, such gentle hands caressed me. No hint of what I soon should bear, what trials were still to test me. At first upon my peg I hung, the queen of all the others, but now dejectedly among my poor ill-treated brothers. Those kicks across the cloakroom floor, the tousled head that wore me, those hard rebukes that made me sore, those inky hands that tore me. But now my owner's growing up and shudders at my state. She does her best with crease and tuck. Alas, 'tis too late. 40 years later, 1984, we get this poem about uniform, which I think is very witty, especially as it comes from somebody who was in lower 4, which is year 8. I'm Terribly sorry, headmistress. I know I'm not fit to be seen. The bottle said shampoo, conditioner. It's not my fault I dyed my hair green. Oh, no, miss, I'm not wearing makeup. I'm allergic to chalk dust, I fear. It brings up my eyes in smooth swellings and my lips turn a curious pink. My skirt is too short. I'm growing. You're not allowed earrings in school. I can't wear red shoes in lessons. Don't think I've heard of that rule. Don't you think I am old enough now to wear minis and colour my hair? For heaven's sake, headmistress, what else is a teacher to wear? That's very good, isn't it? But I do have some reminiscences in the archive of teachers saying, one teacher saying that she was called in to the headmistress, who was Miss Lees, I believe, because she was swinging her arms on the way to school. A lady does not swing her arms. And talking about people's memories, I keep lots of oral histories in the school. Anytime I see a group of people like you lovely people, I say, tell me your memories, because the girls here love the memories. The things that appear in the magazine are sanitized, aren't they? They're selected, whereas the things that come up in the oral histories are often really quite funny or, say a lot about Sutton High School, I think. Take, for example, Marjorie Curtis's memory in 1943. When she said, I had my interview on May the 1st and started on the 22nd of September. On my first day, I was put on a bus by my mother in Banstead and told to get off when the other girls did and follow them to school. I just can't imagine that. Can you imagine saying that to your daughter? Oh yes, we just follow the purple ones, yeah, you'll be fine. And she also talked about what life was like during the war at school, and a lot of people hated the food. But then they did have to eat things like whale meat at the time. It wasn't all nice spam, which maybe you don't regard as nice, but was compared to what else they had to eat. And many of them did their public exams in the shelters, in the air raid shelters as well. So there's lots and lots to know about the Second World War. And Marjorie reminiscences are, after dinner every day, you had to rest on a blanket. Lovely idea. A teacher would read to us. I remember that Miss, blanked her name out, had black undies visible as she sat on a chair. Whoa, I think she was quite she wasn't very staid, that teacher, was she? And then she talked about if the air raid siren went between getting off the bus and the school, I had to lie down on the pavement until the all clear went. They all had what to do during an air raid, and they had to fill in a form. When I say a form, it was just a parent saying, yes, my daughter can come home on her own after an air raid. Things have changed a bit in that respect. So I would absolutely love to have a memory from you, if you don't mind. You don't have to put your name on it. There are cards in the dining room. If you just put the dates of when you were here and one memory, that will go into the archive. I have put out a display in the dining room, and it's a display of Jubilee items, really. But if there's something you really want me to get out, just come and ask me, and I will do my best. And I think I'm going to shut up now. But if you would like to ask me anything or say anything, then feel free.